And then you can either.
Should be recording now. Okay. Well, hello everybody and welcome to the third day of Amerasia Week. My name is Kiana Pinto and the Amerasia organization in collaboration with the Asian American Studies program are bringing to you all another amazing guest speaker for the Asian American Speaker Series. Now, today we have Dr. Virginia Loh Hagan who will be giving a talk on why APIDA stories matter. Dr. Virginia Loh Hagan is the inaugural director of the Asian Pacific Islander Desi American, or APIDA, Center at San Diego State University. In addition, she is also the founder and chair of the SDSU APIDA Employee Resource Group. She is also the co-executive director and director of curriculum development for the Asian American Education Project. Previously, she served as a faculty member in SDSU's College of Education, where she directed the Liberal Studies program, coordinated several international travel abroad programs, led teaching credential programs, coordinated clinical practice and EDTPA efforts, and taught various courses in education and literacy. Prior to working at SDSU, she was a K-8 classroom teacher, community college reading instructor, and program chair for an online university. She's the 2016 recipient of California Reading Association's Marcus Foster Memorial Award for Outstanding Achievement in Reading. She has a Bachelor's of Arts in English and a Master's in Elementary Education and Special Education, specializing in learning disabilities from the University of Virginia. Upon graduation, she received the Outstanding Woman Scholar in Education Award. She earned her doctorate in education with an emphasis in literacy from SDSU USD in May 2008. Her dissertation, for which she received a CHLA Bater Graduate Student Research Grant Award from the Children's Literature Association, and for which she has published peer-reviewed articles and conducted presentations, was a qualitative study on the cultural authenticity of Asian American children's literature. She has authored over 350 children's books and has several academic publications about using multicultural children in young adult literature. Most of her books and research address APIDA themes, and she is serving on various book award committees and is the cover editor and book nook columnist for the California Reader, which is the premier professional journal for the California Reading Association. Now I'll go ahead and pass it over to Dr. Loh Hagan, and thank you for being here with us today and for being a part of Amerasia Week.
And before you start, Dr. Logan, we're going to give you a hand. So let's give her a hand.
This is so great. I'm feeling a lot of affirmations. That's great. Thank you so much, Kiana. I just also want to point out, Dr. Bond says so many wonderful things about you, and you've been fabulous to work with, and I'm just so proud of you and, other APIDA folks that are doing the work. So thank you so much. And thank you all for being here today. And, and thank you, Dr. Bond and Kiana, for inviting me. So I'm thrilled to be able to connect with my Fresno friends. So I'm happy to be here. So just to let you know, I do have a presentation prepared, and I will be talking about myself a lot. So get ready for that. And then I also want to share some of my, main points. I have some main points that I'd like to make about the work that I'm doing, especially, and I'm focusing specifically on the children's book world, because that's what Ken and Dr. Bond said that y'all would most likely be interested in. But know that I am here to talk about a variety of different things, and I really would like to spend this time, answering your questions and getting into conversations with you, etc. And I can talk about a variety of topics. So, I'm happy to go into it all. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So, let me share my screen. And again, it's like I do have a presentation. I will share this, but then I'd like to take this off and just kind of engage in conversation with y'all. All right. So this is what I said I would do today. So this is the lovely flyer that Kiana made. All right, let me get myself situated. Here we go. You can see my screen, right, Kiana? If you can give me a thumbs up.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right, so I'm not going to go into my intro because Kiana did a fabulous job with my introduction. I will talk about all my books as well, but here's just kind of a flash of my books that are specifically related to Asian American studies, or topics rather. So I do consider myself to be a multi-published author, which just means that I write in a variety of genres, and I've published in a variety of genres, including academic stuff, newspapers, books, etc. And yeah, so then these are some of my events I've been to. I'm very popular around Lunar New Year and APIDA History Month. But I always enjoy doing my little visits. Okay. So I also want to start out like one of my first bylines that I got. This is when I was in my early 20s, and Sex and the City was a super popular show. But one of my first bylines was writing a singles column in our local Asian newspaper. You know how many of you have been to like Ranch 99 and or any Asian market, right? Like if you walk outside, those free newspapers you get. So that's what I'd written in those for years. So I think I did this for about 5-6 years. It was really fun, every 2 weeks. So I started with Single in San Diego, and then I wrote about a variety of different topics on dating and sex, etc. And then when I got married or engaged, then I changed the column to The Lowdown to play off of my name. But I still talked about sex and dating and marriage and etc. So anyways, this is just to say, it's like, do practice all types of writing. This is definitely not children's book land. But I tend to, whenever I get into something, I just do it. So I want to share that with y'all too. It's like, you don't have to be pigeonholed into specific genres. So, all right, so this was my first byline. So this gave me, my first name in print. And then let's see, and then I also have academic literature, books, and peer-reviewed articles, etc. So that is related to my identity as a academic in the higher ed spaces. So these are some of my books related to literacy instruction. I also have articles, etc. All the stuff that Dr. Bond is doing as well. And that we really just, when I get asked to do events, it's not about these books and this research, it's more about my children's books, right? But this is part of my writing repertoire as well. It's out there. So I'm also the cover editor and book nook columnist for the California Reader, which is the journal for the California Reading Association. And again, this is part of my identity as an academic. We belong to professional organizations in our disciplines, and we, write and present and etc. So I've been doing this for the past, gosh, I want to say maybe even like going on 10 years. And this is we have 3 to 4 journals a year. So I select the cover, write about the author, and then also have a column in there where I talk about the books, etc. So I'm a big children's lit nerd. So I have it from various perspectives, as a scholar, as a practitioner, as a writer. And when I was a teacher in the K-12 classrooms, I also consumed it. I used it. But this is also part of my writing world. And I'm sharing all these things because I want you to know, like, there's so many different types of writing that you can pursue in your field. You don't just have to be, and excuse me, Dr. Bond, but we don't have to be just boring academics. We can do so much more. I wrote a sex column, right? I mean, like, there's so much more. So that's it. I also, more recently, I actually need to flex this more. This just came out, so this is fresh off the press. But I was a guest editor for the upcoming edition of Social Education, which is part of the National Council of Social Studies. And so there's about 9 articles in there, and I wrote like most of them, co-authored with other folks, but about Asian American themes for Asian American History Month that's coming up. So this is just spanking new off the press. I think it's a gorgeous cover, but so that's coming up soon. My first book as a children's lit author, this came out in 2008. So my first book was called The Jade Dragon, and I co-authored with my friend Carolyn Morrison, who already had several books with Candlewick, and I was teaching with her at a school in San Diego, and we were at a Christmas party, and she asked me, we were just talking, and I was telling her some of my childhood memories, and she said, we need to write this up. This needs to be a story. And then we got together and we wrote, and this is what came of it. So I shared that, and I'll share little anecdotes as I go through this, because again, I want you to know that stories come from everywhere. And so, this book is semi-autobiographical, and I say semi because it is the girl is named Ginny, which is a derivative of Virginia. I mean, real creative there, right? She grew up in Fairfax County, which is where I grew up. So a lot of the memories, that are represented in this book are mine, but my life is not that interesting, right? So that's where we as fiction writers come in, and we make it more interesting. So, although some of the memories and some of the anecdotes may be true, the setting's true, the details may be true, but like the plot has been changed to make it more interesting. So just know that too. It's like a lot of stories, they come from everywhere, but as one of the things that we do as writers is we can take great liberty in making them fun. Okay, so this was, and I could tell you, like, one of the anecdotes that I love sharing about this book is you can see I had sent in a cover, a picture of myself actually as a kid for the cover. And I thought I was a cute kid. Usually I forgot to, but usually because I tell this anecdote all the time. And usually I show pictures of myself as a kid too, just to prove the point that I was a cute kid. But, I definitely think I was a cute kid, but they evidently did not use me as the model for the cover, which is fine. I've gotten over it. But like the cover is gorgeous. And I've been very lucky with all of my illustrators, and that they've always been gorgeous. And just to let y'all know too how it works in the children's book world, the illustrator and author do not talk to each other. We don't even know each other. The publishing house chooses, once they acquire the material, they choose the illustrator. So we could talk about that more later if folks are interested. But anyhow, but I remember my editor when they sent me the cover, one of the post-it notes on it was like, does she look Chinese enough? And I always that tickled me because we always constantly try to get it right. Cultural authenticity is important in stories and illustrations, etc. And our whole industry, especially now more than ever, we're really trying to get it right. So those are the type of questions that we need to ask. Okay. So that was my first book, and then it's a novel, what we call a mid-grade novel. And so then my second children's book is written with Henry Foster James with Sleeping Bear Press, which is I write for Sleeping Bear Press a lot. I love them. And so this book was nominated for a California Young Reader Medal Award. So it's Paper Son, and it's about the Angel Island immigration experience in California in the early 1900s. And one of the inspiration behind writing this was I was teaching fourth grade. And if y'all recall, in the state of California in fourth grade, what are you learning about? You're learning about California history and the gold rush. So as I was teaching this, I realized like, oh gosh, I would love to have some books about the Paper Sun experience in Angel Island. And there weren't many. Millie Lee had the one about Landed. And then so I really was, this book was really inspired by my fourth graders, because I wanted books that I could use to teach them. And Wilson Ong, you can see his illustrations, like my gosh, they're just beautiful. Okay, so, and then my next book is Popo's Lucky Chinese New Year. And this book came about when I was doing book talks for the Jade Dragon. And again, like I mentioned before, I'm very popular during Lunar New Year and May, APIDA History Month. So I was doing a presentation at a school, and I had a presentation called The Do's and Do Nots of Chinese New Year. And it was a popular presentation, and kids liked it and whatnot. And I just thought, gosh, that could be a book. So I tried to write it, and unfortunately, it's hard to turn a PowerPoint into a good book. So it wasn't enough to do the do's and do nots. So then this little girl who is having a relationship with her popo, which is grandmother in Chinese, in Cantonese specifically, she's learning about the traditions of Lunar New Year. So that's where and the do's and do nots come in the banner art. So it's still there, but that's the inspiration behind it. So those of you that are reading it, or will read it to your children or students or whatever it is that you may be, that's your insider tip. It's like the banner of the illustrations is essentially the inspiration, an homage to the inspiration of the PowerPoints that I used to do in school visits. But anyway, so again, and this is another example of how, writers, we make stories happen. So that's Popo's Lucky Chinese New Year. And then while I was writing Popo's Lucky Chinese New Year, I did a lot of research. And that's one of the things that you have to do for all your books, is do a lot of research, because we want to get it right. So even though, people will say oh, it's just a picture book or children's book, whatever. And I want to slap them, because actually writing for children is way harder than writing for adults. Because first of all, writing for adults, I can have as many pages and as many words as I want. In less than 1,000 words, you have to present plot and character development that is going to turn the page and engage. And those of you that have ever worked with young children, do you know what their attention spans are like? So, it is so much harder to craft a good picture book, a good children's book, than it is to write for adults. And I know this because I've written for both audiences. So I always get so mad when people think that writing children's books is easy, because it's not. It's a lot harder. And kids are a lot more critical than adults, because if they don't like something, they don't like something. And they're not nice about it. So, so anyways, but while I was doing research for Popo's Lucky Chinese New Year, I came upon all these traditions. And one of the traditions that I loved was this folk tale about the Chinese New Year monster, Neon. So this story is a adapted folk tale about that. I made the monster into a dragon because I love dragons. And it's also a pourquoi story in terms of why dragons are lucky now, because dragons in the Asian culture are not evil like they are in the European tradition. They're auspicious. Okay. So there's that. And then, so again, I told you I love dragons and monsters and myths and folk tales. So this is my thing. And again, you go down a rabbit hole of researching and you just come up with all these cool things. So I love Norse mythology. I feel like it's one of the darkest of all mythologies, and I like dark stuff. So, T is for Thor, which is a Norse mythology alphabet. So from A to Z, you can learn about Norse facts. I have poems and info text about it, and the illustrations are beautiful. What I like about this book is this came out during the pandemic, but it is. I'll get comments because kids will, they know what their exposure to Norse myths is Marvel. And that is not true. That's the Marvel liberties that they took with the Norse myths, but it's not real Norse myths. So it's always interesting to, have that comparison. But anyways, so this is also an example of, yes, I write about Asian American stuff because I like to, and because I'm Asian American, etc. But not all my stuff is. And I think that's important to note. So as long as you do the research, I firmly believe you can write about anything. But this is one of my books as well, T is for Thor. This is my newest book. So this doesn't even come out until August. We just got the final corrections on this. And so this is hot off the press. So I'm thrilled to be sharing this with y'all. But this is my newest book. It's A is for Asian American and Asian Pacific Islander. They see American alphabet. And again, I go, it's fun facts and information about, our APIDA community from A to Z. I will tell you that one of the challenges of this is I can't cover every topic, but I really wanted to have something that's out there. So over time, this isn't going to be my last book about such a topic. So we're going to, address a variety of different topics, but we need something out there, right? So I'm thrilled to be sharing this with you now. So this is my newest one that's coming out. I also have a new book. I don't have the cover image yet because it is that new, but it's supposed to be coming out in May. So we'll see. But I'm hoping to be getting the cover and the art soon, but it's going to be an anthology, and it's more for young adult readers, but it's called Born Reading, and it's about 20 women who were readers as children and how reading has impacted their lives. So that is with Simon and Schuster, and yeah, that'll be coming out soon. And it was my dear friend Kathleen Kroll, who's also a children's book writer. She really, was a pioneer in the nonfiction world. She died last year, and this was one of the stories that she had started. So she had done 3 profiles, and then I finished the book. And so it's 20 profiles in all. So so that book is a real project of the heart, because I'm proud of it as an author, but it's a real homage to my dear friend Kathy Kroll. Okay, so I have many other books. I'm not really going to go into the anecdotes like I did for my other books, but I will just share them so you kind of have an idea of all the different types of books that I have written, all the different topics I've written, etc. So these are my books about sea creatures. I've written, these are preschool books there. So these simple books about various different animals. Feats of engineering. These are really cool because I don't talk about what it is. I don't talk about what an aircraft carrier is. I talk about how the science works. So if you walk across a bridge, y'all, you need to respect bridges when you walk across a bridge, because that bridge is amazing. It defies, you're spanning a gap, and without that bridge, you could fall, right? So bridges are amazing feats of engineering. So anyways, I talk more about how it works than what they are, which is just, I learned so much doing this. It's so amazing. I have itty bitty bio books about STEM women. So all these books are, featuring various pioneers that we should be paying homage to. I have books about women innovators. And one of the things that I discovered about this series, a fun fact that I learned is women invented a lot of stuff. They just don't get credit for it. And they don't get the publicity for it either, because most of the stuff that women have invented, and these are examples, are things that we use at home, because that's where they were working. So they invented things to make their lives better. But there are so many things that we use every day. Home security systems, the whole idea of having a security, so the surveillance, that came from Marie von Britton-Brown, right? The fact that you have heat in your house, that was a woman inventor, Alice H. Parker. And then of course Hedy Lamarr, who did a lot with communications, the internet that we use now, and Margaret Knight invented the paper bag to hold lunches, right? So all these things that you just are using every day, I would dare to say that most of them are probably been invented by a woman, because they made things to make life easier. But again, it's not sexy. It's not like Tesla, right? So they're not these big sexy things, so they don't get as much publicity, but they've changed our lives. So I want to pay homage to those women that have invented and continue to tinker with very little credit. I also did a series, I nailed it, on extreme sports. And this was one of my first series that I did in these nonfiction high-low. And high-low means books of high interest with low reading ability for students older struggling readers. But with my husband, I told my husband that I was writing this extreme sports, and I have to admit, I'm very lazy. So walking to my mailbox makes me huff and puff. But my husband joked, because he was like, does your editor know that you're allergic to exercise? So then of course I was thinking, gosh, am I the right person to write these? Because I don't know anything about sports. And then frankly, I don't care care about them. But I realized I am the right person to write these because I had to find the fun. So what would intrigue readers like me who have nothing, who are not interested in sports? How would I become interested in sports? And doing these series really made me have, again, a new respect for people that do extreme sports, because it's actually not just about doing crazy off the wall things. There's a lot of science and thinking that goes on behind doing extreme sports. So and all the stories, people that have been practicing these, those are the things that I wrote about. Okay, I also have a series called Odd Jobs. So I, looked at a variety of jobs that were just off the wall or weird, like food stylist. I remember doing this and was really into it. We have the commercials that you see, with the Big Macs and all that. That's food styling. So that's a whole thing. People that test deodorants, odor testers, they smell like your armpits all day long, right? So those are real jobs. There's a job where people smell your farts to see like how healthy you are, and that you make $60,000 a year starting doing that. So like there are so many fun things that I had learned doing these books. Okay. I also have a DIY, make it happen. So these are like long range projects, on various different fun activities. I've Wild, Wicked, Wonderful. So these are the top 10 extreme animals. I love animals, and what kid doesn't? So of these series, on this series, I pitched and I just had so much fun writing it. It's, about all the monsters and myths. So magic, myth, and mystery. So I talk about it, and they're nonfiction. So I talk about like how they came about, like why we believe them in cultures, right? How did mermaids came about? Like sailors saw manatees and basically thought they were mermaids, and then the lore began. So it's like those type of the origins of these, and how various cultures believe in them, etc. What I interestingly found out though was, of course, I have a thing for dragons, right? And vampires, witches, zombies, all these things I thought would be really popular. But when I did school visits with these, what was popular? I'm gonna have you all guess, like guess in the chat or just talk amongst yourself. Like, what do you think is the most popular among kids today? I'll give you a couple seconds to think about that. Okay, did anyone say unicorns? Because that's what it was. The boys even loved unicorns. So unicorns is probably the most popular one, which was surprised me. And then I also have a series on Greek gods and goddesses, and then Norse gods and goddesses, which again, I used a lot for my Tease for Thor book. Egyptian gods and goddesses. And then this is a fun series to write. So these are like the top 10 weird things that are stranger than fiction. So true, but stranger than fiction. The truth is stranger than fiction. Okay, and then I also love doing that. So when I was doing the monster series, also urban legends came about in my research. So these are all fun, like for example, the Hookman, came about in the 1950s when, guess what? Like people started driving cars. So they were cautionary tales because parents were worried about kids driving and, kids necking in the woods. And I don't even know if y'all still use the term necking in the woods. But anyways, so these were things that as a generation, as a culture, folks were scared about. So then cautionary tales came about, like the Hookman, etc. So there's just always, there's an origin for all these legends. I also have a series on true survival. So, these are various people that have survived insane things. History Uncut is a fun series too. So I take people and profiles and then talk about like so that Anne Boleyn got her head chopped off by her husband, but there's all these other fun facts that you may not know. So that's kind of the gist behind this series. So it's all the gossip that you would not have gotten from the history books. Okay. And then Stone Circle stories are, again, like folk tales, cultural folk tales from different genres. So again, you can see a theme here. It's like while I'm doing the myth books, you know, I picked up on urban legends and I picked up on, you know, then the folk tales and stuff like that. So you're always using the research that you are doing or reading. Now behind the curtain is a reader's theater type. So I turned these into plays. So I took moments of history and turned them into plays. So that's what these books are. And then modern perspective. So I have historical and these are more modern perspectives. History's yearbook. So this is where I take a look at history, like girl bosses, like top 10 girl bosses, like most likely to, you know, all the superlatives that we use in history books, most likely best couple, most likely to succeed, and, you know, those type of things. So I have a compilation, an anthology of those. So this was really fun to write. I tend to love these like top 10 type of things. And then of course, Fortnite. Have you all heard of Fortnite? So with the popularity of Fortnite, with Battle Royale, you know, so we have lethal warriors, like what would happen if the Aztecs and the Spartans fall? And you know, what would happen if the Amazons and gladiators fall? And of course, this would never happen in real life because they're from different time periods. So this was, you know, lethal warriors. And then we also followed up on that because that was a pretty popular series. We followed up and did monster warriors. So again, these monsters that would never really fight in real life, like Bigfoot and Krampus, right? Krampus needs the cold, Bigfoot is in the woods, so they wouldn't fight in real life. But what would happen if they do? So these are kind of like the, you know, what they have some choose your own adventure type of things and fun facts about like both groups fighting skills, and then the reader chooses like what would happen. Okay, so could you survive? So these are survival hats. So like, for example, how would you survive lost in space? And then I have various scientific, real science activities for how you would survive if these things happened. So that's a fun series to write. And then Just Breathe for socio-emotional learning. So things about, you know, checking in and meditating, practicing empathy, etc. We also have, because, you know, people love space. I still love space. So all these books about weird things, not weird things, but things in space, just, you know, nutty thing, like black holes, extraterrestrial life, etc. So again, these are nonfiction. And then who are you? So these are personality types. So this book offers, you know, overviews of what that is. And then surviving history. So again, this is giving an idea of like this questions. So this is what happened, and would you be able to survive history? So you know, this is a fun take on history. And then in the know, so influencers and trends. So you know, we wrote about like various trends and influencers in each topic. So fashion, video games, etc. And then weird science. So this is like a how the heck does that work type of thing. Like I'm writing about snot. Like we all have snot, but do you know how snot works? You know, so that was kind of the premise of these, like boogers, right? Boogers are a thing, they form. And, you know, so it's like, that's kind of, you go through your day asking like, I do this, but how does that work? So these are a collection of those type of fun facts. And then I have an activist series. So these are kind of like an activist guidebook, handbook type of series on stand up and speak out on various topics. And then I have a PETA itty bitty bio. So these are from last year. So this of course is inspired by the anti-Asian hate, you know, what's happening. So we have a series about various PETA folks, and I hope to do a lot in this series. And then we also launched a racial justice AAPI. So these are topics on what is yellow fever, what is the forever foreigner stereotype, what is the mono minority myth, and what is Asian Black solidarity. And then AAPI histories. So talk about Angel Island, Southeast Asian refugee resettlement, Japanese American incarceration, and colonialization of Hawaii. And then AAPI excellence. So I talk about political power, vibrant neighborhoods, like, you know, ethnic enclaves, excellence in the arts, and excellence in STEM. I mean, we wouldn't have things like the COVID vaccine without, you know, Dr. Flossie Stahl-Wong, you know, so it's like all these APIDA folks who have really made Zoom. We wouldn't be on Zoom right now if it wasn't for Eric Yuan. So, and Eric Yuan's girlfriend, because just a fun fact. The reason why he came up with Zoom is because his girlfriend, they were having a long distance relationship in college, and he wanted a better way of communicating with her. So we actually have a lot to thank to Eric Yon's girlfriend. But anyways, so these are all fun facts that I write about. So I want just to take a minute and have you either chat or talk to a neighbor that's next to you. But what books matter to you? I'm going to share what books matter to me and made a difference to me. But I want you to think about either childhood or now. So just take a minute and share. So what books matter to you?
And talk about what book matters to you.
And then those of you on Zoom, feel free to chat. I'm losing my voice. Okay, so I know that's a short amount of time, but I realized I was telling Kiana earlier, I'm like, oh, my presentation is short. We'll have plenty of time for Q&A, but evidently I'm chatty because it's not as short as I think it is. Book self-discovery. Yeah, absolutely. Dr. Bond, were there any specific titles that people brought up? Rick Riordan. Yes.
Okay.
He made myths fun.
So the students are, that's such a great question, Dr. Loh Hagan, because I have Empty Pot, right? And then I have 13 Reasons Why. Can you guys tell me other, what books matter to you?
I like a book called Johnny. It's by Johnny Erickson.
Oh, so did you hear that, Dr. Loh?
I did not.
So the book is called?
Johnny, J-O-N-I. It's a woman and she's a quadriplegic.
It's a book called Johnny and J-O-N-I, and it's about a quadriplegic.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's great. Super.
Any other class, any other books that matter to you? Sean, Gerard, what books matter to you? Vicky? Crying in H Mart. Wow,
Yeah.
that's a great one.
Awesome.
So, okay, yes, that was a great question. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm glad to hear that y'all have answers, right? And so I'll tell you what books mattered to me growing up. Anne of Green Gables. First of all, this was the first chapter book that I read, right? And I read it in the second grade. And a school, and I remember, I don't know, do you all remember a celebrated reader, right? And you had to read like your yellow dot or a red dot or like whatever dot you were, and you have to read books in your dot, right? And so I remember I was an early reader. I loved to read. I went to the school library all the time. And I remember in second grade, like I went to the library and the librarian was like, oh, you love this book. Why don't you try this book? And she gave me Anne of Green Gables. And of course I remember being like, oh no, that's a blue dot and I'm a green dot. And I remember, which means I was like supposed to be reading picture books or whatever. But I remember that the librarian was like basically forget the dots. Like here, you're ready to read this, read it. And so that of course opened up a whole world that I'm like able to read chapter books now, and I don't have to wait for the dots to tell me that I can read, what or whatever. So I can read whatever I want. So that was a big revelation. But then also I read this book about this little red-headed orphan girl growing up in Prince Edward Island in Canada, and that's far from like, let's say, my life, right? But yet I felt her. I like I've dyed my hair red. I'm going to continue to dye my hair red when it starts like graying really badly. I've always wanted to be a redhead, and I always wanted to be an orphan. I was not, I didn't have a great relationship with my own family. So like I really, really empathized with this little redheaded orphan girl. And she just, and to this day I have what my husband calls a creepy creepy closet, because it's all Anne of Green Gables stuff that I've collected over the years. It is kind of creepy, but I love Anne of Green Gables. So Green Gables is a book that means a lot to me. Another book that means a great deal to me is In the Year of the Boar and Jackie Robinson. And I dedicated my dissertation to this book and the author because this was the first time. And I remember my 4th grade teacher read this book aloud in class. And that was the first time that I saw a girl like me, a Chinese American girl represented. And I remember that whole week that we were reading this book, I was extremely popular because everyone kept asking me questions about what it's like being Chinese. I feel like I made up a bunch of stuff, but anyways, I like loved it. I like felt seen and heard in books, right? So this was really important to me and it has inspired me. Both these books have inspired me. And I come back to Rudine Sims Bishop, who's a scholar that I study a lot, and she talked about how books should be windows, mirrors, and sliding glass doors. She writes, books are sometimes windows offering views of worlds that may be real or imagined, familiar or strange. These windows are also sliding glass doors, and readers have only to walk through in imagination to become part of whatever world has been created and recreated by the author. When lighting conditions are just right, however, a window can also be a mirror, and literature transforms human experience and reflects it back to us. And in that reflection, we can see our own lives and experiences as part of the larger human experience. Reading then becomes a means of self-affirmation, and readers often seek their mirrors in books. And this is, you know, she's again one of my, I respect her as a scholar a great deal, but this has driven my life's work. And you know that this is why APIDA stories or stories about BIPOC folks in general are important to all audiences, both APIDA folks and non-APIDA folks. We need these books. They matter because our stories matter. I love this image too, because we, you know, yes, I just talked about the mirrors, windows, and sliding doors, but books are so much more. They're stepping stones, overcoats, anchors, springboards, escape hatches, etc. They are so much more. And let's look at 2020, the Cooperative Children's Book Center. They did a study on representation in children's books. And unfortunately, not much, this is still, we're much, much, much better. We have a lot more APIDA stories and APIDA authors that are getting the credit that they are due. But look at the statistics, it's still problematic. We have more stories, 29% more stories about animals than there are Asian, 9%. And then I want to note here, 0.001% are about Pacific Islander, right? So we need stories. And I'm even going to say, if we break down the 9% of Asian, I would say that it's also like, you know, we're gonna have more Far East Asian stories than we do Southeast Asian stories and South Asian stories. So, you know, we have a lot of work to do. We're better, but we have a lot of work to do. So why do APIDA stories matter? How, this is just a show of hands, but you can show me like 0 means nothing and 5 means a lot. But how much of your assigned reading was and is APIDA themed? So I want you to think back to your kindergarten to now. How much of your assigned reading was APIDA about APIDA topics? What would you think? And you could chat it too if you don't want to show thumbs or hands. Dr. Bond, what are you seeing? 0, 0. Okay, I have
see
another
zeros and all zeros, correct, guys? All
zeros. Okay.
Everyone 0.
So that's accurate to what I think. So that's your assigned reading. So now I want you to ask yourself how much of your recreational reading, so that's reading that you chose, how much of the reading that you chose is APIDA themed? So it's more than what was assigned.
I see
right?
ones, a lot of ones and zeros, ones and zeros.
Okay, that's pretty accurate. So, you know, when I look at, I did a quick search of like famous American handouts used in elementary school or K-12. And this is what came up, you know, and one of the things, my point here to note is that there's not a single Asian American here. In the work that in the curriculum, in the lesson plans that y'all did as kids in K-12 that had Asian Americans in it. And when Asian Americans were presented, it was usually the heroes and holidays, right? Because it was like Lunar New Year or like PETA History Month or like the hero here and there. Elaine Aoki, another scholar that I respect, said Asian Pacific American people have been separated from Asia and the Pacific by geography, culture, and history for more than 7. And I asterisked that because her quote was in 1982, so it's even more. 7 generations. We have more than 150 years of history in America, yet where are we in the literature? Are we still foreigners in this white person society? Are we still perceived as whining and apologetic? We still have a PR problem. We still have a representation problem. Things are better, but we have a long ways to go. APIDA folks have made significant contributions to American history, yet they remained marginalized, ignored, invisible, and/or misrepresented. We are a diverse and unique community. So we need multiple narratives. We need multiple truths. We need stories. One of the problems of excluding APIDA histories and narratives, we have incomplete and inaccurate learning. We have negative self-esteem, including lack of cultural pride, perpetuation of negative stereotypes, and perpetuation of systems of inequity, including racism and discrimination, and increase of anti-Asian hate incidents. I firmly believe that anti-Asian hate, the outcomes that we see is anti-Asian attacks, assault, and hate crimes. And the causes are the exclusionary and discriminatory laws and policies. But I firmly believe that the root causes are the invisibility and marginalization and policies, media, books, and school curricula. So we have a lot of work to do in terms of representation. And how can we solve this problem? Everybody can help solve this problem. First of all, read APIDA books. Watch APIDA content, right? Recommend APIDA books. And my research, one of the things that the recommendation cycle was really important, because that's how we, as a society, more than anything else, like we read books because somebody tells us to, whether that's a teacher, a friend, or the internet, whatever. The recommendation cycle is really important. But unfortunately, our stories, APIDA stories, aren't getting into the recommendation cycle. So we need to get into the recommendation cycle. Buy APIDA books. That is how you keep authors like me in business, because that's how publisher houses know. Like, for example, for a long time, publisher houses were, under because they can only submit so many books a year or acquire so many books a year. So, and they have to be able to keep their lights on. So I get it. So they have to be able to, do the bottom line, but they're like, our BIPOC folks don't sell. And that's just the truth. So we can't blame the publishers for this. We also have to take responsibility as consumers. Buy books. If we increase the demand, there will be more supply. So buy APIDA books, check out APIDA books. So at libraries and stuff, and this is free, this just takes effort. Check out books because the library has a system and they count how many books get checked out. So again, if we have a lot of APIDA books checked out, the demand will increase the supply. So they will buy, and libraries are a big buyer for books. So they will buy books based on their patrons' interest. So do that and recommend books. Like, for example, if y'all could do me a favor, go to your Fresno libraries and bookstores right now and you don't even have to buy it. I hope you do, but at least tell them to say, like, you need to order my books. And they'll do it because they operate on demand. Support APIDA creators, right? So again, this goes back to buying books, but not only buying books, but inviting, like what you all do right now, inviting folks like me to come speak, right? And paying us for our time, because a lot of time people don't do that and they just say things like, oh, it's for the exposure. Well, when I'm not writing, if I'm not, time is money, right? So it's like, if I'm speaking all the time for free, then I'm not working, I'm not writing. So, support APIDA creators and then create your own stories. You have stories, whether or not they're published or not, really doesn't matter to me. Just get them out there, share them with people, share them with yourselves, but your stories matter. And then, also follow the Asian American Education org. We have a whatchamacallit, what's that called? Instagram. We have Instagram and we have resources, lesson plans. We did the lesson plans for the PBS docuseries on Asian Americans. So this is a great resource to especially tell teachers about. And then connect with the Asian American Education, the APIDA Center at San Diego State as well, because we offer a lot of programming, and anything that's virtual is open to everybody. So at the APIDA Center, and again, follow us as well. Here's our Instagram. But we believe in stopping Asian hate. And that also means celebrating APIDA joy, amplifying APIDA voices, promoting APIDA creativity, supporting APIDA businesses, nurturing APIDA minds, and loving APIDA people. You know, so stay connected with us. We have and again, it's like Fresno Friends, you know, we're only separated by bandwidth. So, you know, you are welcome to come to any and all of our events. APIDA Center, we have an Instagram. That's where the best way to keep up with us. And then you support us. And then here's my contact. But of course, both Dr. Bond and Kiana know how to get in touch with me. And yeah, so that's the PETA Center. And I will leave the rest of the time for Q&A. I also told Kiana and Dr. Bond too, we'll have to go off record for this, but I'm happy to share some early pages of my new book as well. So let's start with questions. Are there any questions? And Dr. Bond, I'll need your help in getting questions from the room.
Any questions in the class? I will relay it to her.
How many books total have you?
The question is, how many books total have you written?
This sounds really obnoxious and I don't mean it to be, it was just a fact, but I stopped counting after 350. So that's why in my in my bios, it'll just say like 350 plus. It's yeah, over 350. I stopped counting after that.
The question is, how were you able to get your books out there? How were you able to get them published?
Well, I mean, it's kind of like it builds, it's a 15-year process. It builds one after another. It's like started with my first book, and then, you know, I built relationships with publishing houses and opportunities came to my door and I never said no. I did it. And I met deadlines, because that's another thing with publishing world too. You got to meet deadlines and you got to take feedback. I took feedback and, you know, I mean, like, for example, I think with the first book too, or things like, I really like this character, but I hate, oh, I really like this concept, but I hate this character. And the character's like in 9 chapters. So that means revising the entire work, you know? So you have to take feedback. And I feel like one of the things with writing that has really taught me is like, I have a thick skin because of it. Because you are really working with your editors, you're working with focus groups, you're working with a variety of different people that are going to give you feedback that will make your work better, but may hurt your heart because you're like, oh, like I love this character. And one of the things too is that I hope you all heard from me is just because there's only so many pages and only so many, you know, you've got to keep everything tight, but I can't write about everything, but it doesn't mean it goes away. I save it and I write it later. So you can see a lot of things like, you know, a lot of the research that I did that I couldn't include, let's say in my monsters book, you saw that I turned it into urban legends. I turned it into other stories. So and the Popo is a good example of that. Like, you know, I found the neon story from that. So that was a separate book. I didn't have time or the space to put it into the Popo book. So I put it into another book. So you have all these cut things and you can turn it, you know, you can turn it into stories later. But I will say, like, feedback is a big thing. And, you know, it's like anything else. Writing is a hobby, right? For many people. But when you write to publish, it becomes a job and you have to treat it like a job. So when it's a job, that means it's not just something that you do for your soul. It's something that you do now, you know, to to make money, to get it out there, etc. But it now is a different type of beast. So it's like work, and with anything with work, you put in the hours and you have to do the work. So if that doesn't appeal to you, which it does not appeal to everybody, then it's fine to keep writing as a hobby. I think about it that way in terms of my piano. I'm an awful piano player, but I love it. I love playing the piano. I'm bad. No one would ever pay me to play the piano, and they shouldn't. I should be paying people to listen to me play the piano. But like, I'm an awful piano player, but I love it. But I don't put in the time to be better. So, it's like, right, piano to me is a hobby. And that's all it ever will be. I don't plan on making it a job. But if I plan on playing in public and making it a job, I need to put in a lot more time to practice and to listen to my piano. I don't take feedback from my piano teacher, because she'll ask me to, do the metronome and then follow this rhythm and whatever. I don't do it. And that's why I'm never going to be a performer. So I would say, like, really think about like what you want to do. Like, if writing to you is just a hobby, keep it that way. That's fine. That's like how I feel about piano. But if you want to turn writing into a job, and like academic writing, and Dr. Bond knows this, academic writing is a job. I mean, we do it for, we have to do it for our professional review and, just our prestige, et cetera, all of that stuff. It's a job. So I would say that that's my advice there. It's like, for getting in, it's like, you have to really decide that this is a job, and then take any opportunities that you can to get your byline. So for example, that's why I started this whole thing with my Single in San Diego column that I did years ago. So it's like, you just get better. You just work on your byline, and you get out there, you learn how to turn writing into a job, how to meet deadlines, and how to take critiques. So I see that Shamel has a comment here, like, I want to aspiring children's book authors, how would they begin? I would say, first, read a bunch of books. Whatever book that you want to write, you need to read in that genre. There's no, like, I don't understand how people think that, I've used a computer, therefore I can be a computer scientist. That's ridiculous. There's no way I could be a computer scientist, right? Like, I'm savvy, I can use the stuff, but know your craft. So if you want to write, then you need to read extensively in that genre to learn the craft, to learn the trends, to know, like, what is out there. Whenever I tackle a new genre, I'm reading in that genre. Like right now, I'll share, I'd like to get into the thriller, the mystery writing, cozy mysteries is what I want to get into. So of course I'm reading a ton, and I happen to like that genre. So of course you should. So I'm reading a lot in it. But that's going to be new to me. That is going to be new to me to try. So, but I would say the first thing you need to do is read. And read for craft. Don't just read, to read it. It's like you're studying it like everything else. Again, it becomes a job. You got to think about it like a job.
Any other questions?
Oh, thank you, Shay. And yes, please use books in future classrooms. So that tells me that you want to be a teacher. Oh, yay. Love it. Yes. And I believe that teachers are the key to a just and liberatory education. I believe that they are what is going to change the hearts and minds of our generations. So the work that teachers do, and of course I'm biased because I am one, right? But the work that teachers do is what's going to change the world. So yes, so thank you so much. And again, it's like, teaching is a political act. What you choose to include and exclude in your curriculum is a political act. What you choose to read and not read is a political act. So include stories about APIDA folks, include stories about BIPOC folks.
So
I love Groker, I love the APIDA. Yes, I've got my nerd badges.
There's a question from the classroom, and the question is, have you ever had writer's block?
Yeah, I'm making a face. I realize I made a face, and you're recording this, and you're seeing my face in big in the big screen. But yes, of course, everybody does. But I would say that writer's block isn't really, for me, a lack of ideas. It's a lack of motivation to work. And we all have that. And so and sometimes to me, it tells me that my body and mind need a rest. And you walk away, and then you can come back refreshed, because every day there are ideas popping out at you. But also, writer's block comes too when you're resisting having to do something. So it's like, especially I know, like when I'm writing something and I realize, oh gosh, and I have more. I should say that y'all are, if you're impressed with the fact that I have like, a lot of books out there, there's that. But what you also need to know is, like, I have a lot of unpublished stories too. I have a lot more unpublished stories than I do published. So keep that in mind too. But not everything deserves to see the light of day. And part of my writer's block is that it's like, oh, I'm resisting the fact that this story does not work. Or I'm resisting that this character or this scene that I love so much does not work. So there's lots of reasons for writer's block, but everyone has writer's block, and for various different reasons. But again, like anything else, I think it's a mind reset. You just kind of have to walk away. And for me, what I do is, like, I'm so busy with a lot of different projects and a lot of different hats. I'm still I still work full-time at the university. And so, I've got that hat that I'm wearing too. So I've got all these different projects. So I think one thing that have helped me is that if I get stuck in one area, I go do another job, and then come back. So there's that. And I'm the type of person that's always gonna kind of be busy. Like, I like having a lot of different things to do. And I'm also, I'm committed and passionate about my work with the Asian American Education Project. So I'm also working on curriculum, and doing that. So I've got a lot of different projects. So one of the things to keep in mind too, I know this is probably not a question that you're asking, but I will say it, is that, I also, it's peaks and valleys. Like when I'm in deadline for a writing deadline, that's when I'm really working on the book. But then not like right now, I don't have a writing deadline that I'm working on. So I'm working a lot on my PETA Center stuff and Asian American Center stuff, like whatever. So it's peaks and valleys. And yeah, so I know that you have to close out in about 5 minutes because your class ends. Are there any other questions, or Dr. Bond and Kiana, how would you like to do the last few minutes?
Oh, Kiana, I think you're on mute.
No. Does anybody else have
Any more questions?
any more questions?
Okay, Clifton, you had a question? Okay, so let's actually, after this, we can, I think, clap to thank her and then turn off the recording.
Okay.
And if she wants to show us any secret pages, that'd be great. Okay. All right, class, let's give her a hand for Dr. Loh Hagan. Thank you so much. It was a just wonderful presentation. And Kiana, you can turn off now. Okay.
Yes. Okay. I'll turn off the recording. Okay.